In a small town in Ohio, behind layers of barbed wire fence and many warnings of danger, there are about 11,000 holes in the ground. And these giant things, which are churning out an exciting new type of nuclear fuel called HALEU.
3 tablespoons of HALEU is enough to supply a typical person's entire use of electricity for their entire lifetime.
The private company behind this new fuel production wants to fill all those 11,000 holes with centrifuges. Right now, they've built 16. It's the kind of ambitious goal that only makes sense if an industry that's been on life support suddenly has a
nuclear renaissance.
Nuclear renaissance.
Nuclear renaissance.
Big tech is bringing nuclear power back in a big way.
President Trump has laid out a target of quadrupling the U.S.'s nuclear capacity.
We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars.
We will build a reactor a year again. We will build them across the country.
This is no longer about just electricity. It's about India's future.
China is outpacing the United States by at least a decade.
And this new fuel may be crucial to power a new wave of smaller reactors that can be deployed in more places to help power the future of technology.
Amazon and Google, meanwhile, are investing in small modular reactors.
I think in the next 6-7 years, I think you're going to see a whole bunch of small nuclear reactors.
But supplying this fuel gets tricky.
Nuclear reactors run on uranium, and it's not just uranium you dig out of the ground. They have this very complicated process where they have to enrich the uranium into nuclear fuel.
And the need for nuclear fuel is growing. By some estimates, the global uranium demand is expected to more than double by 2040.
Far and away, the biggest company involved in the nuclear fuel ecosystem is Russia's Rosatom. They control almost 50% of the capacity to enrich uranium.
But due to sanctions against Russia over its war in Ukraine, the world's uranium market is transforming. And since the nuclear ecosystem is interconnected, Western countries are being forced to rewrite their entire nuclear supply chains, from mining, conversion, enrichment, and fabrication to building all those small reactors. Success at each link could mean more than new fuel. It could grow new industries and the potential to rake in lots and lots of money. And failure wouldn't just mean these holes in the ground stay empty. It could cause a crack in nuclear confidence that could take generations to seal.
All right.
So
yeah, push that, make it in. It might be hard.
Is it my nails?
Maybe. Try going sideways.
That's funny.
There you go. You're gonna drive rods in, and you're gonna try to keep that number close to that number. So go ahead. Now you're a nuclear operator.
This is a simulator of Reactor 1 at California's Diablo Canyon Power Plant. And the trainee working the joystick is a Brazilian fashion model turned nuclear influencer named Isabel Bemeke. Or for those deeply into the nuclear energy space on TikTok, she's known as Isodope.
This is a plant. No, not this one. This one. A small modular reactor.
What is my purpose?
I started making short 1-minute long videos that were very abstract, and I also try to make it very fun.
She's not alone. In the last few years, there has been a rise in so-called nukefluencers. Some critics note that this new wave of snappy, short-form social media advocacy can gloss over nuanced positions from anti-nuclear groups like Greenpeace.
We don't need nuclear energy. It's still dangerous and polluting.
But Bemeke is not your average nukefluencer. She's reportedly invested in a nuclear startup and is married to Joe Gebbia, co-founder of Airbnb and Donald Trump's chief design officer. The two have donated millions to nuclear causes. This rise in social media influence comes at the same time the nuclear power industry and some Silicon Valley startups are pushing the Trump administration to help kickstart development. And according to her own account, Bemeke was able to provide input on draft executive orders targeting the regulation of nuclear energy. This renewed push is a major change in the trajectory of nuclear power in the United States.
San Onofre nuclear plant is shutting down for good.
Crystal River nuclear power plant now set to close for good.
Closed for good.
Shut down for good?
For good.
For good.
I've been writing about nuclear energy since 2019. And when I started, pretty much the only story, especially in the US, was which one is going to close down next.
From permits to labor to concrete, building and operating a nuclear plant can cost a fortune long before it produces a single watt. And the road to operation can be unpredictable. The two newest reactors built in the US at Southern Company's Vogtle plant in Georgia came online 7 years behind schedule and more than $16 billion over budget. At the same time, solar energy has gotten much cheaper to produce and a lot more reliable to build and operate. But then all these unmarked, windowless buildings started popping up everywhere.
The big tech companies started saying, we need to build out these huge data centers for artificial intelligence. And the thing about AI is those data centers need a lot of electricity. And so they started looking at nuclear power.
Meanwhile, the operating license for California's last nuclear power plant was about to expire.
So at the same time, Diablo Canyon in California was also on the chopping block.
This time, it was a confluence of economic concerns and activism pushing against the proposed closure.
We had a giant blimp rolling through the streets.
We're on a mission to stop all emissions!
To the surprise of literally everybody. The plant is open at least until 2030.
That's not all. Other decommissioned plants are getting a new lifeline, like 3 Mile Island. Now, Constellation Energy is actively working to reopen one of its reactors under a new name, the Crane Clean Energy Center.
Changing the name, really. You cannot erase history. You cannot rebrand a nuclear disaster.
But still, global investment in nuclear energy since 2020 is estimated to be around $300 billion, with ambitious plans in Europe, North America, and Asia to revive or kickstart their nuclear energy sectors. Every step of the supply chain, from mining to enrichment to building reactors, is highly regulated and controlled, because a single misstep could be catastrophic and erode the public trust nuclear has worked decades to regain.
It's a real shift from when I came of age and everyone was worried about nuclear war, because the process of enriching uranium for nuclear fuel, same technology that they use for enriching uranium to make nuclear weapons.
It also means that turning a lump of rock like this into enough electricity to power all of this is complicated. Let's break it down. Uranium ore contains 3 unique isotopes. U-234 accounts for less than 0.01%. So let's just forget about that one. Poof. U-238, on the other hand, makes up most of it, 99.3%. But the key to nuclear energy lies within this one, lucky number U-235, meaning only about 0.7% is the fissile type of uranium. For now, this thing is basically a gamma-emitting rock. So let's turn it into fuel.
You need to first convert the ore into yellow cake, distinguished by its color and fluffy composition similar to cake.
That stuff is then sent to a conversion facility where it's converted into this gas, uranium hexafluoride.
To make the fuel, you take the gas for a spin in a centrifuge. Inside the whirlwind, the lighter U-235 atoms slowly separate from the heavier U-238 ones.
So they go through the centrifuges until the U-235 is at about a 5% concentration.
If you keep things cooking for longer, you'll reach weapons grade, which is 90% or more.
And that's really tightly regulated.
So let's take it out before then.
That uranium hexafluoride gas is sent to another facility where it can be turned into metallic form.
And then pressed into pellets, each about the size of a gummy bear. Then stacked into rods and loaded into nuclear reactor cores. This is where we finally get energy through the form of nuclear fission. U-235 isotopes split, which makes heat, which boils water, which shoots through a turbine, which makes energy. It's like activating a secret Rube Goldberg machine every time you turn on the AC. Oh, there's also the matter of radioactive nuclear waste, which we'll put off to deal with later, just like the real thing. For companies chasing the next big uranium boom, every link in this chain looks like an opportunity, starting from the ground up.
Now this sound going off is telling us we're seeing lots of counts per second here, very high counts per second at 65,000 plus. Now that is some high scale, high grade uranium mineralization.
Rook 1 is an underground uranium mining project from NextGen, targeting the Arrow deposit in Saskatchewan's Athabasca Basin.
The Arrow deposit is the world's largest, highest grade uranium mining project, and we'll be producing approximately 20 to 25% of the world's mine supply.
It hasn't begun production yet, but if you want to check out the site, Lee Courier, the founder and CEO of NextGen, is happy to give you directions.
It's 700 kilometres north-northwest of Saskatoon, 155 kilometres north of the nearest municipal and reservation of La Loche and the Clearwater River Dene Nation.
But even if you're lucky enough to find an underground treasure trove of uranium ore, you can't just grab a shovel and start digging it up. First, you need to raise a lot of capital. Rook 1, for example, costs around $1.5 billion. And then there's the paperwork, like licenses and permits and sign-offs from surrounding indigenous communities, which make up around 13% of Athabasca County.
You're looking basically from discovery of Arrow to likely first pound of production, 20 plus years.
But even before entering the construction phase, NextGen is already negotiating deals with utilities in the US, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Pulling uranium from the Earth is no small feat or small expense. But the real challenge begins when you try to separate those pesky U-235 isotopes. Uranium enrichment is also one of the most tightly controlled, capital-intensive processes on Earth. It's chemistry, physics, and geopolitics all in one spin cycle. This should look familiar.
We assemble the centrifuges behind us, then we take them down this transfer corridor.
And you got these massive doors?
Yes, we call them King Kong doors.
The speed demon behind the wheel is Matt Snyder, a former mechanic in the nuclear navy and a 15-year veteran at Centrus, the only US company licensed to make HALEU, a concentrated type of nuclear fuel.
They've got this enormous facility with 16 centrifuges running and then holes in the ground where they're going to have the rest.
They plan to jam-pack this place with 11,000 centrifuges so they can scale up their HALEU production to power a future market of new nuclear reactors.
It really struck me how this is starting to happen, but it's not here yet.
Standard nuclear fuel is called low-enriched uranium, or LEU, and has a U-235 enrichment concentration of 3 to 5%. HALEU is more potent. It's about 20%.
3 tablespoons of HALEU is enough to supply a typical person's entire use of electricity for their entire lifetime.
Right now, only Russia and China are making HALEU at commercial scale.
So if we were to expand our operations with those 11,000 machines, that's enough to meet the demand left by the Russian sanctions.
The US Department of Energy awarded Centrus, along with 2 other fuel makers, $900 million. But the centrifuge forest won't grow overnight.
With appropriate funding, we expect our full capacity plant to be built within the next 6 to 7 years.
How long does it take to enrich the uranium?
No, I can't go into that.
Because centrifuges can also make weapons-grade fuel, many topics around the technology are classified.
I can't really comment. I can't answer that. I can't talk about that. Can't really comment.
So let me try to get into this next part without revealing any national security secrets. Betting on HALEU also means betting on the next generation reactors that plan to use it, like many SMRs, small modular reactors, that can be built in factories, shipped, and assembled on site.
If you are looking at some of the more ambitious SMR ideas, like placing small reactors in the wilds of northern Canada to supply power for remote towns, you want to use HALEU, as the thinking goes, so that the number of refueling trips out can be reduced, and that therefore would drive down the cost of operation.
We'll get into the economics of SMRs a bit later, though. Hang tight.
It's a chicken and an egg problem. They can't have the fuel unless there's demand. But there's no demand until they have reactors. But they don't want to build the reactors unless they know that there's going to be fuel. You can see where I'm going here.
The chicken and egg problem is being solved at a small scale right now. Urenco has committed to invest in new HALEU production. Orano in France has as well. The next stage is whether there are enough companies that can go beyond a first-of-a-kind SMR model and actually begin serial production.
One company outside of Seattle is looking to become that first SMR chicken, or SMR egg, or whichever one comes next. TerraPower is a nuclear technology company founded by Bill Gates in 2008. Their first SMR, called Natrium, is currently under construction in Kemerera, Wyoming. If all goes to plan, it could be the first SMR to go online in the US.
If you looked at the 90-plus reactors that are operating in the US today, or the 400 around the world, they were born and designed in slide rule space, in the space of paper drawings. But our reactors started their development in an advanced computing environment.
The CEO of TerraPower, Chris Levesque, has spent 30 years in the nuclear industry, beginning his career as an officer in the nuclear navy.
Sorry, with the background noise, I'm having a little hard time hearing you, yeah.
Oh, sorry, was just giving you a quick introduction.
Part of the reason I have trouble hearing is I've spent too much time in engine rooms, in submarines. But, Bill knew he wanted to work on the next form of fission, which for us is our Natrium reactor.
Natrium outputs around a third of the electricity of a standard nuclear reactor, or more when it taps into its molten salt storage tank, otherwise known as Energy Island, which sort of acts like a thermal battery. Each generation of reactor is built on the lessons of the past. Reactors from the 1950s and 1960s are often called Gen 1 reactors. Many were small, unreliable, and had a number of design flaws, like inadequate or non-existing containment structures, inefficient fuel management, and a heavy dependence on manual control. Next came Gen 2 reactors, built between the 1970s and the 1990s. They were more efficient and built for commercial scale and global deployment. Gen 2 featured safety upgrades like automated emergency shutdown mechanisms, but equipment failure and human error led to accidents at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania and Chernobyl in the USSR. Reactors from the 1990s and beyond are called Gen 3 and feature simplified designs, better fuel efficiency, and improved safety systems.
The next generation of nuclear power plants, there's going to be Gen 3 Plus. And what that is pretty much a smaller version of what we've got now. After Gen 3 Plus is going to come Gen 4. Those are different. There's a lot of different designs people are working with. There's different cooling materials. They use different fuels like HALEU. But Gen 3 Plus and Gen 4, they're all generally what we call SMRs. That's a small modular reactor.
Some experts estimate that SMRs will be less expensive per kilowatt than their predecessors, while others argue that first-of-a-kind risks, high maintenance requirements, and regulatory hurdles will ultimately make them more costly.
Large nuclear reactors have been optimized over decades to bring down the cost of generating electricity. And because SMRs are smaller, the amount of energy that they will be able to generate inside of their machines will be smaller on a per kilowatt hour basis, meaning the economics will be challenging. Obviously, SMRs imply there's going to be more nuclear reactors at more sites, which means more regulation, more people to operate them. Those are all things that raise the cost of SMRs potentially.
Another hurdle with SMRs is there are a lot of different design ideas, but they won't all survive nuclear selection.
The amount of SMR designs has grown to about 127 today from just about 80 a few years ago.
Natrium was initially slated to go online in 2028. However, the company was delayed 2 years due to a lack of HALEU, but they found a solution.
That new source for the first core load is going to be a company called ASP in South Africa. It's a U.S. NASDAQ-listed company, but the enrichment operations will occur in South Africa.
So far, TerraPower says it has received $2 billion from the US DOE and raised another $1.4 billion in private capital.
I grew up in New Hampshire, where Seabrook Nuclear Station was being built when I was growing up. And, my parents, who lived paycheck to paycheck, on their electric bill, they had something called the Seabrook surcharge. So the ratepayers were literally paying for the capex of that first nuclear plant. That's not going to work in the US today.
So rather than ratepayers subsidizing utilities reactors, a new shift could see private capital footing that massive bill, including the influx of tech investment, which could take financial burden off of taxpayers while putting control of the country's nuclear power in the hands of the private sector. In addition to Wyoming, TerraPower says it's also signed preliminary agreements with utilities in Utah, Kansas, and the UK, and many other SMRs in both the US and Europe are in promising stages of development. Still, there's a hidden cost that comes with hundreds of small reactors being deployed around the world. Just like larger reactors, SMRs create radioactive material when the fuel becomes depleted. More SMRs deployed globally means more nuclear waste piling up in temporary storage around the world. And currently, there's no long-term solution for where to put the stuff.
If you go to any nuclear power plant, if you go out back, you're going to see these giant steel and concrete casks. And inside them is the spent fuel rods. And those things are deadly. They'll be deadly for 1,000 years.
Some SMR developers claim their reactors will eventually recycle up to 96% of their spent fuel. But even a little bit of nuclear waste exposure could do irreparable harm to the ecosystem, water supply, food chain, and cause long-term health effects. And ironically, many SMRs, due to their compact designs, could actually produce more nuclear waste per unit of electricity than their larger reactor counterparts.
In Europe and the US, they have got to relearn some of the skills that have been atrophying over the past decades, but there's no reason that they cannot overcome the challenge. Whether nuclear power is going to increase from 20% of generation in the US to 30% or 40% of generation in the future is largely a function of other technologies. It's a function of whether gas frackers are going to be willing to forego market share of their product. It's going to be a function of whether we find new ways of making cheap batteries to store wind or solar power.
It's going to take a few years, but by the early 2030s, I'm pretty confident we're going to have more nuclear power plants and more different nuclear technologies in operation.
There's real momentum behind nuclear right now. Money, attention, ambition, social media influence. But this is an industry that moves famously slow, with enormous bills that pile fast. And if the newly forming uranium supply chain begins to topple, the whole nuclear renaissance could collapse. So for all its promise, the path to true energy independence remains anything but certain.